thanks everybody for coming. Again, my name is Kevin Kempter. I am the Chief Data Architect at Consistent State. We are a Postgres professional services shop here in Denver. Let me just take a quick poll. How many came from out of town? Wow, how cool is that? We're thrilled with just the success of this being our first Postgres Day in Denver. We intend on moving forward on an annual basis. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look. It looks like the typical PG East and PG West, the JD runs are going away, and he's thinking about Denver for a single annual conference. So I don't know if that means we merge or he takes it over, or maybe we do a PG Day plus a Postgres conference in Denver. I think Denver's a great location because it's central and, you know, it's Denver. So anyway, thanks for coming. We're thrilled that you guys are here, and I am doing the keynote. So I'm going to talk about when technology works, meaning I was going to talk about sort of Postgres in the real world. That was the official title. And I got to thinking about doing a keynote, and I think what I'm going to try to do is show a parallel between what happened with Linux and what's happening with Postgres. And I think there's a lot of relevant parallels there. Not to say that the Postgres and Linux are the only technologies that have experienced this sort of trajectory, if you will, in terms of success, but they're pretty prime examples of open source technologies in particular that have become extremely successful in the marketplace. Just a little brief bit about Lennox history. We won't go through it all, but you know, it started with the Bell Labs, of course, and then Minix came over. Anybody here remember Minix? You're showing your age. In any case, then of course Linus gets involved, and it turns into a GPL license, and so on and so forth, and brings us up to today, where I think if we were to go back, say, maybe to where DEC and the Spark versions were just coming out in the Linux world, most big corporations had the attitude that you're not putting Linux in my data center because, you know, it's this piece of shareware kind of thing. And there was a really prevalent attitude of Linux was a toy and it's just a bunch of hackers, and you know, why would you even consider? And today, I think if you were to pull data centers, you'd be hard-pressed to find a data center that did not have Linux in it in a big way. And Linux has really sort of hit that tipping point and overtaken the server market, even to the point where Linux is the #1 platform sold for servers today. Just in terms of acceptance, in 2003, Linux server sales hit excess of 900 million. And today, just for Q1 of this year, the Linux server market has surpassed 2 billion, which means we're on track for $4 billion this year, just in Linux server sales, not to include any database license fees or software or anything that goes with that. That's just the Linux servers themselves. So, you know, getting a rack server from Dell kind of thing. My thoughts are, and doing a little bit of research, I think this is pretty accurate in terms of what drove the industry in general to be willing to accept what was originally viewed as a hackish version of shareware, and now these companies are allowing it to be the predominant OS piece of open source software in their data center. I think one was affordability, and that's a big one, but it's only a big one in the context of the other factors. Shareware is cheap too, but you know, you wouldn't take most pieces of shareware that are truly fit the category of shareware as opposed to open source software. You wouldn't really want to put that in your data center. A strong active community was a big one. The Linux community grew up really fast, and got to the point real quick where support, official support, was almost unnecessary. It was necessary from we want to be able to point the finger at someone if something goes wrong, but not necessarily in terms of being able to get support in general. Availability of external tools was a big one. So it took a little bit of time, but it was fairly rapid in terms of all the tools that go with Linux, the software that we run today and the databases being ported to Linux and so on and so forth. Proven reliability and proven performance are a given. I think without that, none of the other factors would have applied, but Linux continued to shine in those categories. And then the availability of commercial support. So when Red Hat showed up on the scene and started to offer commercial support, even though in the early days it was kind of strapped up by duct tape and baling wire, it actually gave these companies the ability to point the finger at someone and say, this is your problem, I want you to fix it. And I think the combination of all of these factors really led to this explosion of Linux that we've seen in the marketplace. I would make the case that we are midstream seeing that same event take place in the Postgres arena. Here's a little bit of just a brief review of Postgres' history. Again, I won't go into a lot of it, but Postgres has been around for a good 15 years. In fact, Postgres is the same code base where both Illustra and Informix came from, which is kind of interesting because Informix based their product on the original Postgres code base, and then years later, Informix paid, I think it was $2 billion to buy Illustra, which was also based on the same code base, which is a little funny, but not totally, because of course the code bases had split and yada, yada, yada. However, from an acceptance perspective, we don't have, we can't point to sales, because sales in the way that Linux server sales apply don't really apply, nor are those numbers really available from a Postgres scenario. However, I pulled this from Indeed Jobs, which is one of the job boards that pulls from all the other job boards. And this is a chart that shows the percentage of growth of job postings specifically asking for Postgres experience. So in the past 5 years, we've seen a 400% plus increase in Postgres job postings. And I think that's pretty good news for, those of us that like to work in the Postgres arena. The adoption factors, I think, are largely the same. The affordability, the active community, the availability of the external tools are there, reliability and performance, the commercial support, and I think proven success is a big one with Postgres in particular. I think there was, up until recently, like 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of reluctance of companies to engage their big database systems with an open source database. MySQL was okay because it was largely 5 years ago used only for websites. And if the website goes down, well, we can deal with it. But for the big core database engines running the company's primary data servers, there was a lot of reluctance there. And I think what's happened is a lot of companies have decided to step into the waters, if you will, and that's led to other companies having a higher level of confidence, which has sort of led to this propagation of companies and brought us to where we're at today. Just quickly, I'll run through each one of these factors and how I think they're really, in a lot of ways, paralleling the Lennox trajectory we saw on the Postgres side. So affordability-wise, of course, it's free to download, and it has a very liberal license, meaning FreeBSD license basically says, don't blame us if it breaks, and number two, do whatever you want with it. So you can closed source it, you can wrap it in another product, you can change it and not tell anybody, yada, yada, yada. Excellent documentation, ANSI compliant, and I think the ANSI compliant thing is really big, especially with Postgres being the most ANSI compliant database there is, inclusive of even the commercial guys. And I think that leads in a lot of cases to a scenario where the in-staff or in-house DBAs, obviously there's a learning curve. If you're coming from Oracle or you're coming from DB2 or Informix, however, the fact that Postgres is fully ANSI compliant top to bottom, it does reduce that learning curve by a fair amount. Obviously, the special Oracle extensions and the DB2 extensions and so forth that aren't ANSI compliant anyway are going to be prevalent in use in any given shop that decides to use that technology as their database platform. However, it does still, at the end of the day, reduce your learning curve. And I think that learning curve is key when it comes to affordability. I think a lot of people talk about, oh, it's open source, it's free, but that's not necessarily the end of the story. And I think with some open source components or open source tools, they haven't been successful because that learning curve is significant. And they're like, well, why don't you want it? It's free. And it's, well, we have to retrain everybody kind of thing. The strong active community, the Postgres community is huge. Not only you guys, but the conferences that we see around the world every year. Postgres has 13 active, highly active mailing lists. I did just a quick search on the PSQL general list, and so far this year we've seen 9,800 posts. And that isn't uncommon across the other mailing lists. Likewise, I counted at least 16 Postgres-related conferences that have happened so far this year. There's a PG Day happened in France, and there was a PG Day in Germany. There was an event in the UK. I think there was an Australian event. And of course, PG West and PG East and PG Open and on and on and on. Postgres is gaining significant amount of popularity. Availability of external tools. This is a pretty short list. I could fill up several slides with replication tools. We've got Sloaney and Bacardo, and there's the Postgres XC project and the Postgres R project, which isn't really ready for prime time, but it's promising. The parallel query tools like the StatO project that Jim's going to be talking to us about today. There's some other parallel query tools. The Postgres XC in particular gives us sort of an open source version of Greenplum, if you will, without the approach that we're really just focused on DSS kind of thing. There's Oracle to Postgres migration tools, and there's actually SQL Server to Postgres migration tools and DB2 migration tools that are out there. There's GUI management tools like the PG admin tool. There's a number of GIS tools and reporting tools and monitoring tools, and it just goes on. And most of these tools are fairly simple to operate and fairly straightforward to implement if you've got some level of database experience and minimal level of Postgres in particular experience. There are some exceptions. Sloaney is not necessarily the easiest to implement your first time, but your second time it's actually starts to make sense and it's pretty straightforward. But there are a number of tools like the PGAdmin 3 is almost a single command and you're done kind of thing. Reliability. Postgres has proven its reliability time and time and time again. Where that really comes from is that the core engine from day one, at the point where they took Postgres 95 out of Berkeley and started to sort of retrofit it and reintegrate it as a single database, as opposed to a collection of various student projects that all kind of sort of loosely talk to each other. From that point forward, the engine has been designed with the thought that the system could lose power at any given time. And that philosophy has driven Postgres to actually have almost a legendary reputation for reliability. I've seen scenarios where I was even shocked that the database actually survived, if you will, went into recovery mode and just came back online automatically. Part of that is due to things like MVCC and save points and point-in-time recovery and so forth. But a lot of it is simply due to the fact that it's been designed that way from the ground up. Proven performance, again, Postgres has really proved itself well here. Postgres still doesn't have built-in parallel query, but even without parallel query, I've seen Postgres go head-to-head with Oracle in multiple scenarios and do quite well. In fact, I don't have the numbers, but I did some work for a GIS shop, and we were out to lunch one day, and they mentioned that they did a significant amount of benchmarking before they decided to bring Postgres in as not a replacement, but just to augment what they were doing. And in every single test, Postgres and their Oracle RAC were neck and neck. Obviously, there's a number of factors that I'm not necessarily saying that Oracle will go head-to-head with RAC in every case. I think in their case, they were largely a RAC shop because it was cool to be a RAC shop, and not necessarily because they really needed the performance of RAC. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of scenarios we run into on the Oracle side, they're doing either RAC or whatever they're running because it seemed to be the right choice. In part because it's cool, but in part because that's what everybody else is doing, and that's what companies are pushing, and based on the research, it looks like it'll do the job. And in a lot of those cases, I would say 80 to 90% of those cases, Postgres out of the box will come in and go head-to-head. Obviously, there's the edge cases, that other 20% where if you're a RAC shop and you actually need RAC, and RAC is barely giving you the performance you need, you're probably not going to do it with vanilla Postgres. You might do it with Greenplum, or maybe the Postgres XC project, or maybe with the stat.io of getting parallel query, but again, that's the edge cases. I think the data partitioning and the tuning options and the large object support we have are just sort of icing on the cake in terms of proven performance. The availability of commercial support has been key, I think, for adoption in the industry. And obviously, there's a number of shops around the world, as well as here in the States, that are offering official commercial support for Postgres. I know we do it. Jim is going to be speaking on stat.io. He does it. There's probably a number of companies here in the audience that support Postgres efficiently. And likewise, a number of shops out there are not only offering support, but the traditional 24/7 monitoring and support that you would expect, like with Red Hat, for example. That sort of style of, if my server goes down in the middle of the night, I want someone on the other end of the phone. Likewise, there's a growing number of I'm seeing Postgres companies that are cropping up, not necessarily in terms of Postgres, we will help you support Postgres companies, but companies that are offering packaged services that include Postgres behind the scenes. And I think we're seeing that in a number of cloud offerings, and we're seeing it just in a number of initiatives that need a runtime database behind the scenes. And it used to be that the default choice was MySQL. I think what we're seeing is MySQL gets to certain points where you have to start to do some less than desirable options in terms of your architecture to get where you want to be from a performance perspective. And to boot, now everybody's terrified because Oracle owns MySQL and it ain't free anymore, kind of thing. So in terms of proven success, I pulled this straight off the Postgres site with the exception of the last couple of bullets there. But these are the general categories of industries that have actually submitted their names to the postgres.org site and said, hey, put our name up there because we're running Postgres. And if you jump up there and look around, you'll see there's a number of companies in every one of these categories that are officially running Postgres and would probably be willing to share thoughts about their experience as well. NASA is a project that we've been working on for a while with Stanford. And I know of a couple of web filtering companies that run Postgres. I think in terms of what's in store for us moving forward is we're going to see a lot more web-based services. I think everybody's all about it's got to be on the web, the interface has to be a web page. And I think that makes a lot of sense with the smartphones and the iPads and who knows what's coming next. And I think hand in hand with that is the cloud offerings we're seeing. And I think in those two key areas in particular, Postgres is really gaining a foothold. We've personally worked with a number of startup companies that really did their research up front, and even if the Oracle ownership of MySQL wasn't on the table, they still would have selected Postgres because it met their needs, and MySQL out of the box wasn't going to meet their needs. Because what we're seeing, I think, especially with the cloud offerings, is these web-based companies that have web-based solutions are now starting to see extremely large data sets and extremely large sets of users, and it's really requiring a lot of horsepower on the back end. And I think there's a reluctance to go down the, let's shard everything to the nth degree and have 257 different instances of MySQL kind of thing. I think we're also starting to see a increase in primarily remote services and package services where companies are almost becoming virtual, where they can pick and choose different partnerships and package up an approach or target an audience with a set of services and say, hey, basically we're a portal, but that's our company. I think we're seeing some non-traditional training methods that are going to take off, which are going to allow companies, for example, US-based companies, to have reach across Europe and Australia and Japan and so forth without having to fly somebody halfway across the world. And I think we're starting to see a slight trend where there's truly less boots on the ground. I know we see it within our shop with pretty few exceptions. Every one of our customers is out of state, and I rarely meet our customers face-to-face more than once or twice for anywhere from a 3-month to a 2-year gig. In fact, there's a couple companies we worked with for 6 months to a year before I even met them face-to-face. And I think that's going to become a pretty standard in our industry. I think in terms of you guys here in particular, given that you guys are working with Postgres, you're working for companies that are leveraging Postgres, I think that we're at that point in the sort of red hat trajectory of success, if you will, where our job needs to be, number one, to really start to innovate and start to push Postgres into scenarios where Postgres does well. And I think that's one of the areas that we need as companies to be very intentional about. We need to start leveraging the cloud technologies, utilizing web technologies. Virtualization is off the charts, and I think Postgres is a platform that does extremely well in virtualization scenarios. And package services, in fact, our company is heavily weighted on the package services side, meaning we look for areas where we can take sort of the usual suspects, if you will, meaning certain things that we end up doing for customers over and over and over again, and we'll just package it up and automate it anywhere from 50 to 80%, and then drop the price, and it's great for both of us. We get recurring revenue based on a largely automated approach, and the customers get a low monthly fee because they don't have to get a consultant out on site to make some of this stuff happen. I think likewise, as we move forward in the Postgres arena in particular, I think partnerships are going to be key. We're starting to see that even with us here in Denver. We're having a number of key partnership companies reach out to us because there's a lot of shops out there, I think, that are looking for solid Postgres relational database skills that they can leverage, but not necessarily have to bring in and hire employees and make it a permanent part of what they do. So I think again, as you guys within your companies looking for partnerships, and in particular, look at the startup market. I think the startup market is a really good area to look for places to try to partner with companies and make sure that the Postgres environment and that the tuning that's been done and so forth, that it's really a good fit. I think one of the biggest detriments to Postgres in particular, but any database platform, is when the platform gets rolled out and it's the wrong fit, or somebody that doesn't know how to tune it has tried to tune it and it just falls on its face, and then that reputation in a negative way starts to propagate across the industry. Obviously, expanding our own offerings through creative partnerships, that's exactly what we're doing. And I think we need to move. I think a lot of times with these projectile style, you know, this is just taken off kind of thing, there comes a point in time where as companies we need to say, hey, let's ride the wave. Because if we don't, our competitors will. And I think, you know, all of the above, looking at these partnerships and looking at ways to innovate, packaging some services. And I think just one of the things that we adhere to moving forward is if it doesn't work, we drop it, and we drop it quick. We try not to get too emotionally attached to any particular set of packaged services, because if it doesn't work, frankly, I don't want it around. So that's pretty much all I have. I just think there's a great parallel between Red Hat, or not Red Hat, but Linux in particular, and how Red Hat was able to step in and offer some of the sort of remaining missing gaps to turn it into a real technology that's been embraced. And I think Postgres is literally on that same track. And, you know, I think that's great. I mean, you guys are here and the conference is a success, and I think largely because that's exactly what's happening. So thanks for coming. I hope you guys have a great time today.